Joining me now live from the West Coast, he's been involved in a major study. He was in the Wall Street Journal the other day. He's waiting for a peer review. We had him on our show a couple of weeks ago. Dr. Andrew Bogan. Dr. Bogan, great to have you with us, man.
Thank you. Good morning, John.
Your study that was done in conjunction with Stanford University, you were on last week, is now under peer review, and it was done in Santa Clara. And basically what you're saying is, if you look at testing, the number of people that have the virus has been dramatically, and when I say dramatically, I'm not talking 2 or 3 times, I'm talking hundreds of times underreported. We got a similar study now going on with USC in Los Angeles, which would suggest that a lot more people have it than are being reported, which means the number of people that their death has been caused by it puts it possibly on a par with influenza. Can you, even without peer review right now, Dr. Bogan, can you elaborate on preliminarily what these studies are starting to show?
Yeah, so John, what we were trying to understand is how many people have had this disease. Not just current infections that may or may not be getting measured by the limited testing that's been available, but also past infections since this disease reached our shores. And it looks like that was earlier than we had originally thought. So what we found in Santa Clara County, again, these are preliminary results. Our manuscript's currently in the peer review process. As a scientist, I always am cautious and respectful of that. But what we did find was between 2.5% and 4.2% seropositive rate in Santa Clara County. That's certainly not 1 or 2 times what was known. Only about 1,000 cases at the time we did the study at the beginning of April were known. We're estimating there are tens of thousands, meaning between 48,000 and 81,000 based on our estimates. That's about 50 to 85 times. So not more than 100 times, but certainly well more than 10 times the number of infections to cases. And what that does is that means that the infection fatality rate is actually that same ratio lower here in our county, and it will vary from location to location. So a group at the University of Southern California, led by Dr. Neeraj Sood, and in conjunction with the Los Angeles County Department of Public Health, just released in the LA Times the preliminary data. Again, their study's also now in peer review. But the preliminary data, because it was an important public health issue in the eyes of Los Angeles County, that they found 4% seroprevalence, meaning people who had antibodies to this disease already, among people who didn't know that they had it. They hadn't been diagnosed with COVID by the medical system. That in Los Angeles County, which is an even bigger county, isn't tens of thousands of additional cases. It's actually hundreds of thousands of predicted additional cases.
When you're looking at potential 4%, there's 325 million people in America. If 4% of them have this virus, right? That is a huge number, and we've now got 2 studies that show it could be up to 4% of the population has the virus. So, I can do simple math. You times 4% by 330 million people, that's a pretty big number. Then you take the 50,000 or so souls that have been lost, and now you get numbers that on a par with regular influenza. I mean, if these studies bear out, the decisions on this modeling we're making is devastating the country. We got now, 26.5 million people have filed for unemployment, Andrew, in the last 5 weeks. I mean, that's 20% of the workforce unemployed. And we're making decisions based on what could be not only false modeling, but grossly false modeling, right?
I'm afraid that may be true. Now, I want to be respectful of the policymakers that were making decisions in the dark without any data about what the true prevalence of this disease was. But the data on prevalence is starting to emerge, and it's not just here in California where we've seen a few percent seropositive, prior infections based on antibody testing in Santa Clara County. We've seen 4% in Los Angeles. These numbers will vary depending on the stage of disease in every different region, every different hotspot or cold spot around the country and around the world. But we've now also seen, 14% positives, which was 14 times the number of known cases in Gangelt in Germany. We've seen about 3% positive in Denmark. So different numbers in different locations. But every place we've seen these numbers, they've been at least 10 times, order of magnitude larger than what had been detected by the traditional public health techniques. And what that means is that the infection fatality rate in each of those locations, which also will vary from location to location, but is tenfold lower. And you're right that here in Santa Clara County, with respect to our population and our experience with the disease so far locally in Northern California, we're estimating an infection fatality rate between 0.12 and 0.2%, which is somewhere in the ballpark of influenza. That varies every year too, of course, and it's different regionally somewhat as well. But this is not, from what we've seen, something dramatically different. It might be a little more. It might even be twice as much. Maybe if we're off by a little bit, it could be 3 times as much. But we're not talking about something that is, 10 or 20 or 50 times more deadly than influenza, which are the kinds of numbers that went into the original models on which a lot of the policy was based.
You're the first one really to get at the forefront of this, now followed by the USC study. You study in conjunction with Stanford, and I do respect the peer review process. Folks, we're with Dr. Andrew Bogan. He is a managing member of Bogan Associates, LLC. He's also the founder and managing member of his company, but he also has a very deep academic background in a lot of different areas, and he's a scientist by trade. You do a study, you've got 2 of them now saying the same thing. You have to draw some preliminary conclusions. And preliminarily, it looks like the COVID-19, as horrible as the infection is, and obviously it's going to affect the people that are vulnerable. They need to do everything they can to not catch this virus because it can be fatal to them. And it's also, I've talked to people that have had it and recovered. Some it was like the flu, others it was discomfortable and painful. But they got through it like any sickness. But the bottom line is, when this is said and done, it is potentially the mortality rate could be on a par with a common influenza or very close to it. And we have destroyed the entire American economy and put so far 27 million people out of work as a result of this. But the thing is, Andrew, the panic is still going on. We got governors in Michigan that you can't buy seeds and plant a flower. I mean, the panic is still gripping the country. I live in Virginia, where the governor has refused to open things up. He says May 8th. I don't have any confidence in that. If peer review comes back that these studies have a high degree of accuracy and probability, is the scientific modeling community that was so far off, are they going to come to grips with it and admit it?
I think they will, John.
Really?
These things always take time. This is new and emerging data. It's now emerging very consistently of it being infection numbers that are more than 10 times the known cases around the world. We've seen that now in Santa Clara County, where we did it first. We've seen it in Los Angeles County with our colleagues and collaborators in Southern California. A pilot study that had nothing to do with us in Massachusetts showed that in Chelsea, Massachusetts, in the Boston area, that 32% of people in that very hard-hit epicenter of disease are seropositive. Governor Cuomo in New York is rolling out a statewide testing program that'll be reporting results in a few days' time, from what he said, on antibody tests. So I think we're going to get these numbers, and we're going to get them soon. And my belief is that the modelers will put this new and very compelling data, as you see it consistently gathered across the world, into their models. I too am very respectful of the peer review process. It takes some time. We're doing that. We're taking it very seriously. One aspect of this study getting an enormous amount of public attention is we've probably gotten more scrutiny in the peer review process than I've ever seen on a single scientific paper. That's great,
Really?
John. That's really good. We want that scrutiny. We want to be sure we're right.
For the layman out there listening to us and our national audience, tell our listeners what the peer review process means, Dr. Bogan.
So the peer review process is any kind of academic study. If you're doing some kind of scientific research, once you've collected your data and you've written up your data in terms of your methods, your results, your detailed explanation of what you did and what you found, you send that manuscript in typically to a journal for peer review process. These days, there are also preprint servers, which is where our paper is actually available to the general public. So we're getting basically crowdsourced peer review in addition to the formal journal submission. And your goal is to find other experts in the field to try to poke holes in your methods, your methodology, your approach, your statistical analysis, every aspect of the way you built your hypothesis, constructed your experiments, and measured the results. With that said, there's really nothing spectacular or surprising or novel about doing seroprevalence testing, meaning testing for antibodies for a particular disease. This is a well-known, well-established, and well-understood approach. There are some limitations of sensitivity and specificity of the test. That's well-known. That's included in all of our publications so far. This is nothing really that surprising. It's getting a lot of attention because of the politics around it, not so much because we did anything unusual. But that attention's good. Like I said, that means we're going to have a lot of eyes on the results we have, and hopefully a lot of eyes on the results from Los Angeles, from Gelt in Germany, from Robio in Italy, from Iceland done by different methods, in Denmark, and certainly coming out of Massachusetts and New York, where we've seen much more progression of this epidemic in the northeast of the United States, sadly.
We're with Dr. Andrew Bogan. Dr. Bogan has an undergraduate degree in molecular biology, a certificate in material science and engineering from Princeton. He also earned his doctorate in biophysics from the University of California, San Francisco. He was a United States Department of Defense graduate fellow and a recipient of University of UCSF's Kozlov Fellowship awarded for excellence in graduate research. And he is with us now, and he was the one of the leading people of the study that was done in conjunction with Stanford University, and another one now in USC, which potentially is showing that the number of people across the globe, but especially specifically in the U.S., that have this virus has been dramatically underreported. Now, if your peer review process goes through and we can conclude, okay, we've got maybe 13 million people in the United States who have the virus, that would be about 4%. We had 13 million people. If that were to play out, we've got now governors that went from, let's see, not enough COVID beds, not enough ventilators, too many people dying. Now we've got everybody's got to be universally tested. If your peer review process plays out, 13 million people affected, what does testing do? What does universal testing do? How does that solve anything, Dr. Bogan?
Yeah, so John, I'm actually personally very skeptical of the need for universal testing. I think symptomatic testing makes sense for any disease. If you go into your doctor's office and you're clearly sick, I think testing makes a lot of sense. I also think that population sampling, like we've done in Santa Clara County and others have done in Los Angeles and elsewhere, is very important. Doing seroprevalence sampling to understand the progression of this disease from city to city, from region to region, around the country and around the world, so we can really keep a close measurement of what's going on with this pandemic and make sure we know that we're moving towards some conclusion of it. But you're right that if we're looking at potentially hundreds of thousands of cases already having occurred in Los Angeles County alone, that may not be the prevalence in other cities and other regions. In the Northeast, it's clearly higher. And there will be places, that it may be lower. But it's going to be impractical to do contact tracing and universal testing on all those people on any kind of ongoing basis. And, for an active viral infection test like the PCR methods, that only tells you if you have the virus today. It doesn't tell you anything about tomorrow or the next day. So when would you stop testing?
That's my point. Thank you for saying that, Doctor. That has been what I've been saying on the radio for two. Look, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a scientist. I do talk radio, intelligent. I mean, I can just look at this stuff, this call for universal testing, which is now stopping my state, Virginia, here from opening up, is ludicrous. Because just what you said, I'm going to Atlanta next week, right? Because I'm going to be there to celebrate my friend Brian Kemp, politics governor of Georgia, for having the courage to open up the state and put everybody back to work so they can put food on their table. And my point all week was, if I get tested on Sunday over the weekend in Richmond, Virginia, and I'm fine, I come back negative. I then drive to Atlanta and I stop at the Exxon station on 95. I pump gas. I don't put a glove on. Somebody had the virus, touched it. Now I have it. Now I have it Sunday night. Do I have to get tested every day in perpetuity? I mean, it makes no sense.
I share your concerns about the feasibility of that kind of approach.
Great answer. Thank you, Dr. Bogan. I can't wait till this peer review comes out. Every couple of weeks now, we just have to get you on so we can keep going over this, because this is probably the biggest thing out there as it concerns the hysteria going on with this virus. But I got to take off. Dr. Bogan, thank you for being with us today. Thank you for your fabulous work